Alright, so today's video is going to be about grading cards and why for the most part it's pretty much a scam and you're probably better off just not grading your cards, especially if you're just a collector in general and don't ever really plan to sell your cards. Like most things in this world, there's no absolutes, right? There's no absolutely right answers, absolute wrong answers. There's like gray lines in between. So before I go into why you shouldn't grade your cards and why in most occasions you're probably better off not paying these premiums for these graded cards, I'm going to go over in what situations that you might want to consider buying a graded card. And I'm going to use the Ghost Rare Blue Eyes White Dragon from Haunted Mines as an example again. So a near mint copy of it goes roughly for around $150, even if like mildly played or whatever, sometimes might go for over $100. And the difference between that and getting a graded version is that I actually have a graded 9 version of the Haunted Mine Blue Eyes. The difference between that and buying a raw one off of TCG Player is certain cards, especially Ghost Rares, you just know in general, they're all scratched up, they have all sorts of dings. And no matter what you do, you're just going to buy a banged up version of it, which is why in certain occasions like this, you might be better off buying a graded copy 9 version of it because the price difference is probably very, very, very minimal because in general, most people just buy 10s and they don't want to go for 9s or 8s. But that's the main problem, right? The reason why I feel like grading in general is just... It's pretty much a scam is because the price difference between a 9 and a 10 or an 8 to a 10 is astronomical. And as for the actual difference between them, that's up for debate. And I'm going to use an analogy to make it a little bit easier to understand once you put it into context. Have you ever been in school, whether it's college or high school, and you turn in a paper to one professor or teacher, and every single time you turn it in, that one teacher gives you an A on everything and thinks that your writing is amazing. And then you think, okay, this is great. And then you go to another teacher the next semester in a different class, and every time you turn the paper, they tell you, oh, you could do better on this, and then they give you a low grade, and you don't understand why, because the previous teacher gave you a really high grade and think your writing is really good. How come this one thinks that you have a lot to improve on and they don't think this paper is as good as the last one? So the reasoning behind why one person might grade something higher than another is because it's all arbitrary at the end of the day. It's all subjective, and kind of like if you were to observe art. You might go to a museum, look at a painting, and someone might tell you, wow, this is like the best painting in the world. But you might go look at the same painting at the museum and go like, you know what, it looks like a piece of garbage. I just don't understand it, right? And to tie that concept back to grading is because these cards are all graded by people and they're run through people. I know they have like these systems where it's going to be graded by computers or whatever it is. But don't you think there's an issue whenever you look up, oh, where should I grade my cards? People are always going to argue, oh, you should grade at PSA, or you should grade at BGS, or you should grade at this company or that company. The fact that people argue whether or not which company is better to grade with kind of shows and explains that this is all arbitrary and the grade itself does not matter. Because you constantly see people arguing back and forth like, oh, it's easier to grade certain type of cards here, easier to grade certain type of cards here. They're more lenient on this, they're more lenient on that. Isn't there an inherent problem with that when you think about it more clearly that, you know what, if it's easier to get a certain grade here than another place, then wouldn't that mean that the grade itself means absolutely nothing at all? If I were to tell you 2 plus 2 equals 4, there's no arguing on that, right? It's a set, definite answer. If I want to find out what 2 plus 2 is, I know it's 4 when I add it up together. The problem with grading cards and grading companies in general is that there's no set formula as to whether I submit at PSA, Beckett, KFC, Mountain Dew. It doesn't matter, right? You have people that submit cards, the same card, they get an 8. They crack open the slab, they resubmit the same card again. Oh, this time they get an 8.5. They crack it open, they submit it again. Next time they got a 6, they got a 7. And then they keep sending the same single card in over and over again, just opening it back up until they get a 10. And then, wow, that one time whoever they graded the card gave them a 10. Isn't there a problem with that? And the problem with this system on top of that as well is when you look at population and you look at pricing. So the problem with population first. So we tie it back to the idea that since grading is pretty arbitrary depending on who grades it, who you go to, what company you go to, there's no set formula as to what's considered a high grade, right? You might look at a difference between a 9 and a 10. Most people will probably just end up, even if you look really closely, you can't tell the difference. And then all you can say at that point is just that, well, I guess they know what they're doing, so they probably saw something that I didn't. But then you have to think about it a little bit more deeply, and then you realize from a business standpoint, if we were to admit that grading is arbitrary, then wouldn't that make their whole business model completely pointless then? If everyone were to go like, you know what, there's really no difference between a 9 and a 10, why should I send my cards in to even get graded in the first place outside of just getting them, sleeved up in a case? And then you also have to look at the fact that if they were to make these population reports, which they do have to show, okay, obviously the mint 10 ones, which are considered perfect, are very, very limited as compared to a bunch of 9s, right? So then, if you logically think about it, then that pretty much means that they're gatekeeping the amount of 10s and keeping most cards, even if you consider them flawless, would be at a 9, right? But they have incentive to be able to keep the population low, so that way there's some sort of prestige in order to get those 10s, which is why a lot of times when people look at these cards, they go like, I really can't see a difference between it. And then, oh, okay, maybe it's the centering or whatever it is. And then you end up looking at some 10s, they go like, oh, you know what, I got really lucky. They were very lenient on giving me on a 10, even though it's a little bit off center. It has like a kind of like small ding on it. And then you realize, like, so that pretty much that means that the system, it's meaningless. So the main point I really want to make is when you actually look at even submitting cards itself, it's also tied to dollar amount and money. So if you look at it a little bit deeper, you'll realize, so card grading, the actual grade itself determines how much your cards are worth. And that's arbitrary, right? And then when you look at submitting my card, oh, okay, depending on how much my card is worth, then whatever grade they give, then this is how much money it's worth and this is how much they'll end up charging me for it. And then on top of that, when you look at it even a little bit deeper, these auction companies, these grading companies, and these sellers on eBay, they're all somehow tied together. And then you realize, oh, out of every step of the process, someone's making a commission off of this. Someone's making some kind of money off of this, depending on what grade it is. So everyone's getting a cut at some point of this, and it's all about money, 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 money. But that pretty much means that the actual value of your card is just determined by how much money someone is going to make off of it. So I'm not making these things up. One of two examples would be PSA's parent company, if you look it up, acquired at some point a company called Golden Auctions, which also auctions off graded cards, right? So if you think about it, with money involved, someone's always benefiting from it, right? So if one company controls what grades you get, also is owned by a company that dictates how much auctions go for, and then makes commission off of how much money, is made. So when they have incentive to jack up these prices and inflate the value of these high graded cards so they make more money off of it. So on one hand, you have the prestige of, oh, this card's valued this much, so if you grade it with this company, then you're going to make a lot more money. So everything just goes hand in hand. And then when you actually just Google like FBI investigations on card grading in general, which I think started like in 2020, like a year or two ago, you'll see that there's all kinds of investigations when it comes to just all sorts of weird things going on, like, oh, companies grading cards after fixing them and trimming them so that way they come out as pristine 10s, things like, all kinds of issues when you think about, okay, if there's actual people grading it, then when you run into the issue of, oh, if someone's buddy-buddy with someone, then couldn't they just give preferential treatment to certain people? You just have to think about these things, especially when the fact that, again, right, grading is all arbitrary and handled by people. And when there's people that have their hands in it, then someone's going to always want to benefit from it and try to make money off of it. So that's when you have to be really, really careful. Because at the end of the day, there's no regulations when it comes to these things. And by regulations, what I mean is, I used to work in securities and trading and, finance in general. And you need to be registered pretty much with the government in order to do this, right? And there's certain laws that prevent you from having conflict of interest, and you would have to disclose it. Say, for example, if I'm selling you, I don't know, XYZ stock in my company, and you know what? I'm going to tell you to buy 10 Pepes, but I have to let you know that, you know what? I have an interest in Pepe's and I own the company Pepe. So therefore, if I'm trying to sell you on it, I have to disclose and let you know that, I have an interest in this and I own part of the company, which is why I'm selling it to you. When it comes to other things like everything on social media or card grading in general, there is no regulation that stops people from just saying, you know what? This product is great. You should buy this clown Pepe and it's worth a bazillion Bezo bucks, right? But they don't have to tell you that, you know what, it's worth a bazillion Bezo bucks, because they're the ones that own the company and dictate what the price of it is. And then to tie it back to card grading and just grading in general, the reason why I don't like graded cards in general is because the price and the grade itself is pretty arbitrary, and it means nothing for the most part. Yes, there are certain cards where if you tell me this card's folded in half, is dinged up, it has white edges, obviously it's not a perfect 10, right? So you shouldn't pay a premium for it. But if you tell me the difference between a 9 and 10 is pretty much negligible, and for the most part, most people when they look at some 9s and 10s, it goes like, well, I guess it's something that they saw that I didn't see. And then you have the same people that end up opening those slabs and submitting the same card 10 different times, getting different grades, and then finally getting a 10 on that one card on the day that, okay, they decide to give a 10. Then doesn't that mean that grading in general is completely pointless, and the difference between certain grades after a certain point is pretty much up to whoever is grading it to decide it then? And I have the KFC logo here because I feel like I always shit on these Batman cards, but I really can't find a better example than this. Is that all these random grading companies that pop up, why you shouldn't grade with them, why you shouldn't buy these grading company cards unless it's like super, super, super cheap and pretty much the same price as if you were to buy it like raw without grades, is because these companies all popped up during whatever's been happening the past 2 years, and they were just capitalizing on the fact that people couldn't submit it to Beckett. People couldn't submit it to, PSA. So that's why, on top of the fact that those companies are already arbitrary to begin with, you're going to add it into a further niche and grade it with these random companies that will probably not be around for that long. So to kind of wrap it all up, just simply, like all my other videos where I point out, if there's someone making money off of something, and if they have incentive to do something, which in this case, to have cards graded higher and lower, and then the price difference being so big, as well as having auction houses, and then you have all this other crap that's going on that's being investigated by FBI and other companies, and then you look at certain cards that are graded differently even though the differences aren't that big, then you realize this whole system it's just out to just take advantage of people. And at the end of the day, you know what? If you're spending your hard-earned money, always just be careful of, you know what? Think about how whoever's selling you whatever item is making money off of it, or if they're selling you a service, how it benefits them before you think about how it'll benefit you. So that's it. Pretty much my suggestion is when you're looking to buy cards, just realize that whenever you look at a difference between graded cards, 8, 9s, 10s, most of the time people are going to tell you, and everyone asks this question all the time if you look it up, I can't tell the difference between this 9 and a 10. And then someone might answer him, oh, it's because of this, it's because of that. But no, at the end of the day, when you look at a lot of these cards, they're all pretty much the same. And one card that got a 9 could have ended up as a 10 on a different day, and one card that got a 10 could have ended up as a 9 on another day. So just be very, very, very careful. If you're looking to buy cards, buy either raw and just make sure you inspect the pictures, or if you're looking to get a graded card, just realize that the difference between a 9 and a 10 is not worth that premium. Most of the time, you could probably buy like an 8 or a 9 and it's just as good. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you learned something from it, and just be careful out there. There's just so many people that are just trying to make a quick buck nowadays that there's a lot of people out there that are just getting taken advantage of when you just don't look at these things more closely. You wouldn't think that people would be trying to scam people buying just cardboard. You know what I mean? Thank you. Have a great day.